Hello YouTube, Ben here, and today I am celebrating because my original 10 tips video has exceeded 250,000 views, over 225,000 views. So to celebrate that, I thought I would just go ahead and revisit the idea of 10 tips and give you what my 10 tips would be today in light of everything I've been through. For those of you that follow my channel, you know I've been through a lot of growth, a few setbacks, and in light of all of that, here are the 10 tips that I hope you'll find helpful, and maybe it'll save you a little bit of time, maybe a little bit of money. All right, so here we go. Enjoy them. Well, tip number one is going to be very much like it was in the original video. Tip number one is education. Always be learning. Always be seeking knowledge, and realize that the second you think you know everything about the hobby is usually the moment right before you make a major catastrophic mistake. So always be learning. Always be seeking out information, and from the original 10 tips video to this one, I would say that what has become go-tos for me have been, of course, KG Tropicals on YouTube, Tank Talk on Facebook, IFG, the Inquisitive Fish Guy, Evan Alexander, and he has his hashtag Hapnation, and that's going on Facebook. And also, of course, Jay Wilson, who has the Aquatic Lounge on Facebook, and Jay Wilson on YouTube. And there's other videos, you know, other folks I like to watch. I like to watch Steve Poland. I like to watch Adam C. And folks like that. There are a lot of good YouTubers out there that have a lot of tips and also have tanks that are just a joy to look at. And I really enjoy quite a few YouTubers. But the key is always be seeking information, always be seeking knowledge, and use the resources that are out there, whether it's YouTube or places like Cichlid-Forum, Seriously Fish. There are lots of blogs out there that you can get into conversations, and definitely avail yourself of what's out there. That's tip number one, knowledge. Always be seeking knowledge, and always make yourself better at keeping fish. All right? And that's proven very, very helpful for me. Tip number two is redundancy. What do I mean by that? You know, in the airlines, they have systems that kick in. If systems fail, another system kicks in to make sure that airplane lands. You can apply a similar philosophy in fish keeping. And I just learned a lesson with my lights. I had my lights actually go out on me, and so I had a dark tank. I was actually using a shop light to keep it lit, and I learned a lesson. It's always good to have backups. I run 2 canister filters on my 2 main tanks. Should one fail, while I get the second one repaired, I'll still have filtration. Currently on this 72-inch wide tank, I have 2 36-inch light fixtures. If one of them fails, I'll still have some light while I get the second one repaired or replaced. So backups and redundancy. I suggest you have an extra heater, maybe an extra power head, maybe even an extra filter. I have an extra Marineland 400 that I could get up and running immediately if I needed to. Stuff some media in it and get it rolling. So have backups. Always have backups. You can't predict when something's going to fail. So tip number 2 redundancy. Tip number 3 is try to be species specific. This is very contrary to the tank that I had when I made my first video. But as time went on, I found that fish of different species were actually starting to become more and more aggressive with other species. The Mabunas started to attack the peacocks, become very territorial, and in some cases would herd the fish to one side of the tank or the other. And so little by little I started phasing into strictly haps and peacocks, and the next phase here of that evolution will be this tank will be exclusively haps, and the peacocks that you see in this tank, like that little otter point that is just right there in the middle of the screen, the peacocks in this tank will go over and be in the 60. After the haps in the 60, the juvie tank, become large enough to come here, the 60 will become a peacock tank. And I find that things are more peaceful in species-specific tanks. And even then, you'll still get some chasing and a little bit of violence, a little bit of aggression that comes with the hobby, that comes with these fish. If you don't have the temperament for fish sometimes getting chased or beaten up, then African cichlids may not or shouldn't be maybe your first choice. You may want to consider something a little bit more peaceful. Neons, things like that, you know, community tank fish. My next tip, plants. When I first got going in cichlids, the general consensus was don't have plants in a cichlid tank. You can see the clown looch there resting on one of the broad leaves, kind of cute. Anyway, the consensus was, most of the tanks I saw on YouTube were bare. They were just simply rocks and sand, and it made sense because cichlids love to dig. They love to dig things up. And after watching a video by Corey, right, at the Aquarium Co-op, and listening to a few things said by Dustin's Fish Tanks, I came across Anubias and Java Fern as being very, very compatible with a cichlid tank. So the tip is consider including plants in your tank for a couple of reasons. One, of course, they help with nitrates, which can be a problem in cichlid tanks. And also, I think they're very, very aesthetic. And they do add some oxygen to the tank. So they're sort of a win-win. They do take a little bit of work. You do have to touch them up from time to time. And in the case of Anubias, you do need to attach them to something like a rock, either with glue, like super glue gel, or you can even tie them like I've done it with a couple plants in here with fish line. My next tip is surface tension breakup, surface agitation, oxygenation. For those of you that follow my videos, you know I've learned that one the hard way. So I'm very big now on really making sure that there is a lot of surface tension breakup, as you can see here with the power heads. And I also have it going on the other side of the tank. I've turned the outputs of both the SunSun 704B and the FX. I have them pointed upwards, so they're breaking up the surface tension. This is creating oxygen by allowing bad gas to escape, and allowing oxygen to get into the water. And if your fish are working their mouths, like sort of gasping, if your fish are hanging around the surface, they may be low in oxygen. Just be aware of that. Create surface tension breakup, add bubblers, add something that will break up the surface and oxygenate your tank, and also create water movement so that the oxygen-rich water from the surface can get down to the bottom of the tank where oxygen isn't quite as plentiful. All right, so there's a tip: surface tension breakup. My next tip is sand as a substrate. Here on my tank you can see I have a black aragonite. This is a substrate that is very smooth, very soft. So with fish like the Phosochromis rostratus, the sand diver, and other cichlids that spend a lot of their time sifting through the sand, they're not getting their lips, and in some cases their gills, cut up by sand that is coarse, maybe like a blasting sand or a play sand that might be coarse. So I'm using a soft, natural aragonite, and it also helps with the buffering. In other words, it helps to keep the pH where it should be. So use sand, use limestone. You can even put coral, crushed coral and shells in a micron bag and put it inside of a canister. These kind of things can help you with your pH. But this tip is use something like a Caribsea or an aragonite, a sand that is very soft that your fish can sift around in, play around in, dig around in, and in the case of the Phosochromis rostratus, even bury themselves in. Okay? An important tip for cichlid keepers especially. This last tip was true when I made the video the first time, and it's still true today. And that is have fun. Sometimes we get a little bit overly serious. We get a little bit too concerned, a little bit too worried, and constantly testing our water and constantly checking this and checking that. And you know, we don't just sit back and enjoy the hobby, but we spend a lot of time worrying. And it really kind of takes the joy out of it. So my advice is to enjoy the hobby, don't stress, and don't worry so much that it takes the fun out of it. And also, don't worry too much about what people say about your tank. Certainly take advice and realize that some people are giving you advice in an effort to help you. But sometimes folks will come across mean-spirited, and they'll say things that can be hurtful. And those types of comments are really comments more about that person than they are about you or your tank. So take what people say about you and your tank with a grain of salt. Don't take it too seriously. And remember that if you do post anything, whether it be on Facebook or on YouTube, you do open yourself up to comments and criticism. So if you do have a little bit of a thin skin in that area, or you tend to react very strongly to criticism, I don't suggest you get onto social media type blogs because people can be a little cruel. I have run into that, and but just remember that there are also a lot of people out there, the vast majority, who are actually willing to help you and be friendly. So ignore the haters. Haters will hate, trolls will troll, and just have a lot of fun with the hobby, and certainly take to heart advice from those who are offering their help in a kind and well-spirited manner, and simply ignore the trolls and realize that when they come across that way, it really is more a comment about them than it is about you. So that's my advice. and I hope it helps. It's a little bit different from the tips I gave a while back in my original 10 tips, and certainly I've changed, and I've evolved in the hobby a bit, and a lot of you have been with me along that journey, and it is greatly appreciated. And those are the tips. All right, that's it. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you very much. I appreciate all the support all of you give the channel, and certainly the support you've given that video in particular to put it up over 225,000 views. And I hope these 10 tips are helpful to you, and hope they save you a little bit of money, a little bit of aggravation.